left Alaman and then do-side-do.
Here we go, another Square Dance Callers Talking. Tonight, I have Dana Schirmer. I met this gentleman a few years back when he was heading up Callerlab, and I went to my first Callerlab convention. I met Dana and Donna Schirmer, and one of the nicest guys, and I finally get a chance to have him on my podcast tonight. Mr. Schirmer, how are you?
I'm doing real good, thank you.
It is great to see you where you live, and we'll get into that in just a minute. I get to see you probably once or twice a year, depending on the conventions, always at the Callerlab and national conventions, and every now and then might throw something in the middle if we bump into each other. But where do you live?
We live in Barrington, Kansas, which is just outside of Topeka, Kansas. I've been there about 40-some years now.
Okay. Where were you? You weren't born there? Where were you born?
Just east here in Lawrence, Kansas, back a long time ago.
So Kansas pretty much your whole life?
And most of my life, I spent 2 years in Chicago with Santa Fe Railway. When I worked for Santa Fe, they moved up there right out of college.
You're a railroad guy, huh?
Yep, spent 25 years with them.
No kidding. My dad retired from Seaboard Coastline Railroad, which is now no longer in existence, SCL. Yeah. And he was out of Savannah for all my life, for the most part, down there. Did not know that about you, man. That's awesome.
I retired there in 1996 as manager of financial and budget accounting.
Okay, very nice. I asked my mother, I said, why didn't I ever go into the railroad since my dad retired from there? She's like, I didn't want you to do that kind of work. Okay, well, you should rather me be a police officer, I guess. That really worked out well. So Kansas, for the most part, other than some Chicago time, what we're doing on here is Square Dance caller stuff. So when did you start square dancing?
Actually, I did it back when I was about 6 years old. My family was in 4-H. My sister was in the competition group in 4-H. She's a couple years older than I was. Our neighbor right across the road, I'm saying across the road about a quarter mile away from us in the country, he was a caller, and he worked with 3 different 4-H groups there. And about every week we'd get together for a practice session for the competition group, but then he'd also throw in things for the rest of us to do. It could be hokey pokey, it could have been all kinds of stuff, but we did certain singing calls, Little Red Wagon, things like that. We could do it because he taught us the figures, and that's what we always did, the same routine to the same song. And then I danced probably until about 11 years old, and he retired at that time. I got out of dancing at that time. When I went to college, 1967, went to college. I started dating a girl that was a square dancer, and every weekend she's going home to square dance. So I said, well, if I want to see this girl on a regular basis, I better get back in dancing. So I went back and I joined their teenage club. I was 19. I was the oldest one in the group, and I was in the teenage group. Never graduated. They didn't graduate people. You went so far. Each night the couple that did, they were not callers. They just had tapes and records and so forth. And they teach you the certain songs. And after a while, they'd say, you're getting pretty good, and we have a traveling group, and you're welcome to go with us next dance we go to.
Oh, okay.
That was your graduation, in essence. You got to go traveling with
Get to travel with them.
So that was fun.
Talking to I've talked to a good handful of callers now, all over the age spectrum, and like you said, it used to be it was all memorized, or it was already there. There was no, extemporaneous sight calling, whatever you want to call it. When did you get into the actual calling?
1977.
77.
About on a dare. When I really dare, a threat. That's what I said. My wife and I had helped create a brand new club, and the caller was a real nice guy, a friend of our family, and he never changed anything. It was always the same music every night, the same music, and we were trying to promote the club, and we were kind of talking behind his back, saying, "Gosh, we wish Bill get some new music because all the guests coming, they're hearing the same dance every night. So one night I'd read an article in Sets and Orders magazine. It had a new record out called Rodeo Bum on Red Boot.
Okay.
And so it had 5 stars. So I just kind of mentioned to Bill that night. I said, Bill, I just reading Sets and Orders. That kind of new song came out called Rodeo Bum. You heard about it? He kind of looked at me in a stern face and said, no, you buy it, you do it. Kind of snotty like that. Made me mad. I will. So I bought the record and practiced it for about 6 months. One night he came to me and said, you ever buy that record? And I said, yeah. Go get it. You're going to do it. So, okay.
Wow.
I couldn't carry the tune. I mean, the song I knew like the back of my hand. I couldn't carry the tune, save my soul. But I got the commands out. And when I came off the stage, there's like 8 couples down there. You want to learn to call? We'll help you.
Wow, that's fantastic. Gosh.
So I started right away. We had, in fact, the caller I did work with when I was 6 years old, 4-H group, he had retired, but he still has equipment, and he was there that night. And he said, well, I got the equipment. We'll set it up and practice somewhere. So once a month, I'd get together with a group of people, and they let me experiment with them. That's kind of where I got started. And I played around with them at least once a month, sometimes twice a month. Had a place in the basement of the bank that let us use it free, and we danced down there. And I had, like I said, 7 or 8 couples come every time, and most of them are good friends, and most of them still are good friends. They're still around. But that was my beginning.
Man, that is so. Now the caller that was retired from back when you were 6. But as you got older and you got into, hey, I want to start doing this calling more often. What other influences? Who were some of your influences?
Oh gosh, when I first started into it, it was kind of more of a challenge to myself. I was looking at it being, I was always intrigued by seeing callers move the dancers and put them back in spots and so forth. But the one that really stood out to me is Marshall Flippo. I mean, that's before I started calling. I mean, he'd have 30 squares on the floor, and he'd be calling along and said, you're home. And I'm looking around, how do you get everybody home at the same time? Well, now I understand, but back then, as a dancer, how do you get everybody home at the same time?
Yeah.
It amazed me. And just some of the things he did was intriguing to me. So that was kind of one of my first leads in wanting to be a caller.
Okay. I was never fortunate enough. I met him probably about a year before at a Callerlab convention. I got to meet him in a large group when he was walking through, and got introduced to him and just said hello before he passed away. But I'd only heard about him. So I would have liked to have had some time to actually listen to and watch him work. But it just didn't set up that way.
I recorded many, many dances of his, and I've got them on cassette tapes. I need to get them pulled off and digitized because I don't want them, but I got a lot of recordings.
I would love to hear some of those. If you can think about it, bring 1 or 2 of those cassettes to a Callerlab or something so I can just listen to them. So tell me, you start calling. When did you start getting involved with Callerlab?
Oh gosh. Well, of course, back when they started in '74, I started in '77. Back that time, you had to be calling at least 3 years before you could join Callerlab, and you had to be recommended by someone and also attend a convention.
Okay.
And so I started in '77, but not a full year. So it was actually would have been 81 or 82 by the time I would have been qualified to join. And I forget where the conventions were, but I couldn't swing it in my schedule, so I didn't go. Flippo was one that recommended me when I finally got to go. I think it was 83 or 84. I went to the Callerlab convention in Chicago, and I was just in awe. I mean, 800 and some people, and it was just, I mean, names. Most of the people I didn't know, but I knew their names. From recording artists, Sam Mitchell, Frank Lane, all these people. Some of them had danced to before, and I just, wow, this is just amazing. And trying to fit in with these people, and it was just. Then there was a session there, and I think it was 1984, and I would recommend anybody goes. It's out on YouTube. Recreational reinforcement.
Recreational reinforcement. Okay.
That one just made my whole trip worthwhile. John Jones, Dick Hanhurst, and Jack Lasry, and they put together a session. Everyone attended it. It was not like today we basically have 4 different sessions going on. That one, everybody attended that session, and it was boy, it really had a lot of meaning to it. So I recommend you go out and look for that one.
Absolutely, I'll find that one.
Especially Jack Lasry had a really strong presentation. So
I do. I work out of my office now, in regular work, and I spend a lot of time on the computer. And I'll have in the background, I'll have some of the old Callerlab conventions going, YouTube videos going in the background, just listening to it. And I mean, I get so much out of that.
That was one of my better ideals.
Yeah.
Because I was going to Niagara Falls for the convention in 2010. I'm driving by myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just thinking of things, brainstorming things. And that was one that came up, well, gee whiz, we have all these cassettes from prior conventions, legends, of our activities, giving these presentations. I don't know who has to write these things because they were sold by the convention recording group. So I made a note for myself to go talk to the guy that ran the convention recording tapes during the convention. Well, one afternoon while the session was going on, I went over and sat down next to Scott Argo, who owned it. And I said, just out of curiosity, who actually has the ownership of these tapes? Because I don't want to cheat you out of money. You were selling these. I said, well, gee whiz. He said, I don't sell anything old. He said, I only sell the current conventions. As far as I'm concerned, you guys have all the old recordings yours. So Jerry Reed was the chairman of the history committee, and he overheard us, and he said, well, that'd be a project for the history committee to pick up. So they got it all digitized MP3 version, but in order to put them on YouTube, you have to be MP4. So the office staff then had to convert everything from MP3 to MP4.
Okay.
That was one of my ideals. And that actually led us into the second part of that discussion, where it was Scott was saying he really wasn't making any money on the recordings anymore. Not enough people bought the whole package. Mm-hmm. 30 or 40 people maybe buy them. So I said, well, what would it cost for us to buy the master? And we sell them. Yeah, that's a good idea. I said, I wouldn't have to come even. I'd just send my one man, that'd be it. So that's what we did. We presented to the executive committee, and they said, yeah, let's try it. So he was selling between 30 and 40 sets. And when we got the master the first year, I think we sold 400 sets.
Great, goodness, that's fantastic.
But the big difference was he was selling for like $200. We're selling $25. So
right.
We made our investment back real quick.
Good.
That just was a nice little adventure I hadn't planned on, but got it.
And I've got kind of the same story now. It's a few years past. I think my first Callerlab was 13, 14, I forget. It was New Mexico. My wife reminded me it was New Mexico. So whenever that was, about 10 years ago, I guess, 9 years ago.
Albuquerque, and that would actually have been 2017, I think.
Was it 17? Okay, so that would have been my first Callerlab. I think I joined Callerlab in 2014 and probably went to the convention in 2017, but it was New Mexico. But same thing. I'd watched a few YouTube videos of this guy, that guy, and I go out there, and I think the first person I went and was sitting at a table was Scott Bennett. Mm-hmm. And I had a couple of his songs already, and I was just, blown away. I was like, oh my gosh, that's Scott Bennett. And then, then I see, Ted Lizotte, and I'm like, I know, I got some of his music too. Oh my gosh. And so there's no substitute for the Callerlab conventions. National conventions are great. I love national conventions. I love state conventions, depending on the states and all. But Callerlab is just it's a different level with the contacts.
You really can't explain it to people until you experience it. And the like I said, just that opportunity to sit down with someone like Lee Kaufman and talk to him about something, or Flippos, or I mean, they all just human beings are just talking to you about common things, and it's amazing to be able to do that. And So I recommend anybody go to Colorado. I think the first convention you go to is the most memorable one.
Absolutely, it is. Yep.
It's like I said, you're shocked by seeing what you see,
Yeah.
and hearing people like that. So,
You know, the thing that really pulled us in is the dances they have at night, and you get to hear these guys that you never get to dance to because they're in California, they're in Texas, they're in Kansas. I mean, I don't get to dance to them. So, that was just a different level. And the dancers are so good because they're all callers and they're partners, for the most part. So
yeah.
you got a really good floor of dancers too.
Yeah.
And then being square dance callers, everybody wants to show off a little bit. So you're getting the really good stuff from the stage. So that's a pleasure to hear.
Yeah.
Well, Dana, like I said, when I talk to the callers, I try and get into kind of their process. So now when you do a dance, is it mostly memory for you or is it sight? What do you do? Well, how do you approach a dance?
When I first started, and that's what brought me closer to Jack Lasry, was when I first started, I'm scared to death of how much stuff I got to memorize here. And I tried to write it down. I didn't want to sit there and try to read it. I knew I wouldn't be able to see the dancers. So I tried not to write anything down per se.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to put memory, but it was just too much. And then I read this article by Jack Lasry in Sets and Orders magazine about sight, extemporous sight.
Mm-hmm.
And well, this is interesting. I didn't know about that, but I started reading it. It kind of made sense. And I was practicing my practice group with a little bit of that, and I wasn't really comfortable with it. I don't know anybody probably starting out like that would be.
No, that's true.
But I kept practicing it, and just so happened in May of 1978, the Caller Association I belonged to, I had just joined. They brought Jack Lasry in for a clinic, and I'm sitting on the front row. And then within a matter of just a few minutes, I'm sitting there, see it, having him just sitting there and run a square through, and I see it. They take a break, and I'm walking out in the hall with some of the older callers, and I don't understand what that guy's talking about. And I see it. I
Awesome.
visualize. I really see it now. I understand. I just having him explain step by step what he was doing. It really made me. So I consider myself a sight caller, but I'm not really a sight caller. I don't think there is such a thing as a sight caller per se.
True.
You have to have some modules. You have to be expanding your modules all the time. So, but I get compliments all the time because I am watching the dancers, and I can fix things on the fly. Hey, two ladies here trade, things like that. And I give them time. If I see somebody get behind, I'll give them a little time to catch up. And so if you're reading from the script, you're not going to see that.
Yeah,
And
no, you can't.
You got to have your eyes on dancers. In my mind, that's my belief.
That's kind of what got me into it. I thought when I did singing calls for probably a year or so when I first started out, and then the caller Ray Monty, who's passed away a few years back, he said, well, let's do some pattern. And so he would send me little modules, be email or write it down for me. And so I started doing that, and I thought, well, I'll just write these things down, and I'll go up there with my flashcards and start reading it. And the way I learned is I would look back down at the card because I try and watch the floor and read, which is next to impossible for most. And I would look back down and I'd hit that set. I was like, I don't know where it is. And so I'd have to look back up, and I was like, oh, let's just go. Lines pass through Wheelandale and kind of go from there. So I thought, I got to get away from reading stuff. And I do now. I'll go into dances. My first tip I've got planned out pretty much, and then kind of go from there and learn it. My plus tip, I've got it kind of, I know what I want to do, but it's a lot of sight too. And there's a freedom once you get comfortable or you feel comfortable with sight calling. And yeah, you do. When you do a pass through, kind of what you're going to go to, a little different from the next person, or a tag the line where you're going to go. But that's just something you've got to keep expanding, like you said. Do you have what level do you dance at? What level do you call at?
I dance basics. No, we dance up through advance, and I call it through advance.
Okay. Do you have a favorite call?
Favorite call, I I like to use cast off 3/4 from lines facing out without being centers in cast off. I like just have a line of 4 go through and then say cast off 3/4. That's my test. That's where I test the floor if I'm not familiar with the dancers. If they can do a cast off 3/4 from just standing lines, then they're pretty good dancers. But most generally, people can't do a cast off 3/4 unless you put centers in. It seems like
that is correct, and that's really good. And another reason I started doing these podcasts is it's a little caller school for me because I'm trying to pick up on things like that. And Justin Russell, what's that?
I also use a slide through a lot from a half size shape position.
Okay. Yeah, that'll teach you about a floor real quick from half size shape.
If they know how to do a slide through and not be facing, just turn around facing the partner or something like that, then that they know the call well.
Yeah, that's something a lot of callers might not necessarily think about. If it's not your club, if it's a guest tip or somebody hires you out to do their Friday night or Saturday night dance, whatever, you really, that first basic mainstream, whatever you're doing, you really got to test a couple calls just to see how it goes, kind of get a feel. One I like to do is one that I picked up from Justin Russell. On my first plus tip, I always open with from a touch a quarter from a follow your neighbor, and that's all, because you'll break a couple of squares down if you don't say and spread, because you just say follow your neighbor, and you'll see people like, whoa, that's not the whole thing, and I'm like, no, it is. So you'll learn something real quick about your dancers who say they're plus dancers, and you drop that and they don't get there. So man, I love that. That's great for callers to test your dancers pretty quick on. Have you done a lot of traveling with your calling, out of country, in country? What do you think?
Not anymore. I mean, I pretty much just was there in the Midwest for quite a while. I called them mostly through the whole state of Kansas, some in Missouri, some in Nebraska, some in Oklahoma, but mostly it's Kansas. And quite honestly, I've got to the age where I'm not traveling that much now. I have 3 mainstream clubs. I have 2 plus clubs, 2 advanced groups, and I pretty much stay within a 50-mile radius of home. And I don't go out traveling long distance anymore.
You said you've got four classes going through right now?
I got 4 classes going right now. Let's see, 3 are my own clubs, and 1 is a club just south of here, a small club that doesn't have a regular club caller. So I'm doing emphasis for them this year. Now, it's keeping me busy every night of the week right now, except Wednesday nights.
Okay. Well, I'm glad we got this in on Wednesday night for you then. As much as you're calling with your clubs and all that in the years that you've been doing it, do you have any favorite singing calls that just hey, this is my favorite one?
I've got several, and I've seen callers in our area that get hooked on one singing call, and every dance you go to, they do that song. And I had a real favorite one, "Beautiful Sunday," Star. Eric Henry cut it, and next thing I know, everybody in the area is doing it, and so I quit doing it for a while. And the one caller, I mean, every dance you went to, he called it. I mean, it's just every associated with him. That's his singing call. Well, but I started it. I started using it first, but I don't. I've tried to keep moving songs all the time. I like Sugar on Blue Star, and several Royal records. I can't tell you which ones right now. What is it? Wave on Wave.
That's a great
one. One of my favorites old time is Riding My Thumb to Mexico.
Okay.
On a red boot. That was one go-to. The caller that actually dared me to start calling, he did it all the time. So we'd get together, we'd do a duet with it, and it was fun.
If you're not listening to square dance music, what kind of music do you like?
Country.
Very good. Okay. And I'm guessing that's the older country, not the new country.
Yeah. Okay. More older than.
I figure we are probably on the same page.
Yeah, some of the new stuff I don't mind, but there's some just don't make sense to me. It's
Right.
more rap than it is country music. So
Well, and with all the clubs, with all the calling you've done over the years, and with the Caller Lab conventions and all, any funny stories jump out to you? Any stories about that stuff?
oh gosh. I mean, we used to go down to Kirkwood Lodge all the time when it existed. Of course, Flippo was there. Bob Byer, Wade Driver on staff. One time Elmer Sheffield was down there. And we had all kinds of good memories down there. My family used to go with us. Flippo taught my daughters how to ski. Um, and just so many memories down there that's probably my favorite memory bank with things that I've done is Kirkwood Lodge. Flippo was we've learned that there used to be a group of Texans come in, and they like to do on Thursday afternoon. The week would be over on Friday morning, but on Thursday afternoon they like to do a mystery tour and go somewhere around the area, visit something. And so Flippo always had the workshop in that afternoon. There would just be a handful still left because most of these people went out from the mystery tour. And you get Flippo started telling stories, and he told you all these stories, just one laughter after another. So it was a kind of the fun time for us to wait around there and see what he's going to come up with. But and the skits, he and Wade and Bobby would put on some really fantastic skits every night after the dance, and that was.
Gosh, I wish I could have talked to that guy. Another thing, now you've got a couple of different halls that you go to all the time now with your clubs. Are there any venues or clubs that stand out to you as, man, this was just a beautiful place, or anything like that?
Oh, geez. I mean, we have our own square dance hall here in Topeka. It's built by square dancers. It's real nice wood floor, stage, a whole bit. And it's a beautiful hall. Unfortunately, it's like a lot of the halls. There's just not a lot of square dancers to keep it going.
Right.
The financing for it, the property taxes are going up, insurance and everything else. And number of clubs are going down. So it's a little bit on the edge right now of what's going to happen there. But I'm trying to think anything else. Kirkwood Lodge, the dance floor there was fantastic. It was floating as a maple floor on cork. And we have windows around the sides, so you look out over the lake. Mm-hmm. There's just a fantastic dance venue. But there's so many we've gone to that gosh, escaped my memory, some of them. But did get to go to the one that Marshall Flippo built down near Abilene. When he died, they had a luncheon there at the service, and we were there for that and got to see his hall there. But I guess that's now closed now. So
that's good stuff. What kind of stuff do you? I mean, granted, we have Callerlab every year. Beginning of the year. Do you have any other stuff, dances coming up, or anything you want to talk about on that?
Well, I've stepped down as the executive director of Callerlab. Mm-hmm. I've stepped down as the chairman of the Basic Mainstream Committee. And my new challenge, which is not officially announced yet, but in the works, I'll become the Guild of Pride executive director here shortly. And so I'll be contacting all those people that don't belong to the Guild of Pride here and trying to get you to join and help support the mission of protecting our music. I
understand. Yes, sir. Yeah, I didn't know what that was a couple of years ago, and I saw some of the hangers on the tags there.
That's going to be my goal, is try to actually educate people on what we are doing and what the purpose of it is, and try to come up with incentives for people wanting to join. And that's going to be my goals to do. Okay. Kind of a side note, as though I don't have enough to do.
No.
When I stepped down executive director, well, even before that, when Teresa moved into the area, and the pandemic was going on, I started doing Uber driving. Okay. I drive Uber during the day now. So just have something to do and meet people, and it's interesting.
Well, man, that's actually pretty exciting. I never thought about that. Especially around Kansas. I've never been up that way. I think, well, I've been up to Indiana, and I'm terrible with math. I don't know if actually got into Kansas. But at
Most
some point
people,
we'll get it. What's that?
most people just drive on through, heading to Denver, or from Denver back to Kansas City or something. But
Yeah,
and
no,
most people say, "Oh, that's flat land." Well, in the northeast here part, we have a lot of hills, and
okay.
we get a little bit past Topeka and start into past Manhattan. It starts getting into more flat land where the wheat's growing out in western Kansas.
It's so it goes without saying, because I ask everybody, you're going to be in Grapevine. Obviously, you'll be in Grapevine, Texas for Callerlab.
Right.
And I know you still have your hands in it, although you've stepped down from a couple things, but you got the Guild of Pride. Anything that you know that for us to look forward to for Callerlab coming up for the convention?
I do not know offhand, as because I'm not really in that anymore. I mean, the executive committee has met already. They got plans in place. I've agreed to doing a session or two. I think I can't remember what the hell, but as far as the rest of the program, I don't know. I know the facility. I've visited the facility when we actually had it booked for 2021. And due to the pandemic, we had to cancel that convention, but I had done the site inspection back years before. It's a really nice hotel, really large convention area. Of course, we won't use all of it. It's going to be
right.
Like we use about 20,000 square feet. That's well over around 100,000 square feet convention area. So it's a big convention area. A nice hotel, Hyatt Regency. If you go to the convention, try to find time and go downtown. It's kind of a historic old time feel to downtown area. So it's not like modern city. We got all kinds of mom and pop little stores down there that nice to visit.
I am looking forward to it. I've been to a couple places in Texas. I've been to Houston and San Antonio. I think I passed through Dallas as a part of that. So looking forward to going to Grapevine and seeing what they have down there.
Well, if you're flying in, you can I think it's Terminal C. You go to Terminal C and you walk right into the hotel.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, because we definitely are flying in. That's great.
Yeah, you can go through from the airport right to the concourse and into the hotel.
That was what I liked. Pittsburgh was really nice. Pittsburgh was a setup like that. That was a really good setup. That was nice. Of course, now the weather won't be that bad in Dallas, so that'll work out okay. It's a little more sketchy when you get to Pittsburgh and up through there that time of year.
Make sure you go to the right terminal too, because one of our executive committee member, I won't tell you who, didn't fly into the right terminal. He flew into Love Field rather than to the Dallas. Okay. So he had to take a bus to get over to the meeting.
Oh, well, Dana, man, I appreciate you doing this, man. I was really looking forward to it. Like I say, you're one of the first Callerlab people that I met when I went to my first convention because you were running it. And we've talked several times since then. It was my pleasure, man. I hope you had as good a time as I did.
Sure.
And it's really good talking to you. And like I say, with most of the callers I talk to that aren't from here, unfortunately, I won't see you and probably until Callerlab. But I'm looking forward to that, man.
Well, I'd like to throw a little thank you out to Larry Cole. I don't know if
Larry Cole.
Larry Cole. Larry Cole was the one that gave me my first step into Callerlab. Technically, I'd gone to conventions. I'd asked, I'd asked John. Oh gosh, my name escaped me. George White, about possibly being on a committee chair or a vice chair. I want to get involved, and didn't really hear too much. And then Larry Cole came into Kansas, did our state convention, and we got talking a little bit. And next thing I know, George White called me and said, "Hey, we need a vice chairman of the basic mainstream committee." Back then we just called it mainstream. I said, "I'd be happy to do that." He said, "Larry Cole's the chairman. He recommended you." And that was my first step into being recognized in Callerlab and giving me an opportunity. So I owe him a lot. And we've had good friendship since that time. He was one when he went on the executive committee back then. An executive committee member could not serve as chairman of a committee. So when he stepped on that, he turned around and said, well, I'm recommending you to be the chair now. So I gave me my step up the chair, and little by little, that gave me visualization throughout the membership that I got elected to the board of governors then.
Okay.
I mean, just those little steps helped my progress in Callerlab. And actually, Larry was on the selection committee of the when they selected the assistant executive director. I was one, so he helped me all the way through.
Well, man, I'll thank you for what you've done over the years with Callerlab, starting out there, and everything you've done going forward. Because, like I say,
well, we were very happy. You know, it's tough stepping down. As I told people, I looked at it as being, it's not really smart to be sitting there with a 70-year-old man in charge of the organization. And I think when I retired, I was probably the oldest executive director Callerlab had at the time, because I think most of them had retired late 60s. Of course, George White had died from cancer, but I think Jerry Reed was 68 when he retired, and John Kaltenthaler was probably in his 60s then. So here I am, 70 years old. And it's about time I get off here, because I think something happened to me, then Callerlab be sitting over, nobody actually knowing what's going on, except for the staff. And so yeah, it was kind of tough doing that, but I think for the wise part, it was the best decision to do. And I sure, it was a hard job to step down from, because I really enjoyed my time with Callerlab. It was a fun job. It was a lot, got to meet a lot of people, get to talk to a lot of people. I was very fortunate. We had some really good people to work with us. So that was that. The volunteers, the office staff, they're always very good. And we had a good working arrangement all through. And just little things. I mean, the membership cards, you know, little plastic membership cards.
Yeah.
When I took over, the office, financially, we had lost money several years in a row. And I'm sitting there saying, you know, we're down to getting pretty low in our saving account. And so we got to start figuring out ways of cutting costs. So just looking at the membership cards, used to be we had to go out and buy those things from an outside vendor. And he sold them in batches of 500. So you have to have them engraved the way we want, and not with your name on it, just being, hey, this is person's licensed and insured through Callerlab. Then you had some for overseas callers. You had some for licensed insurance only people. Every time you buy it, you had to buy in batches of 500. So if you had 1,200 members, you had to buy 1,500 cards.
Yeah.
You had 200 foreign overseas callers, you had to buy 500, even though you only need about 150, 200.
Right.
License only about 200. Well, we got to buy 500. So we were spending close to $2,000 on membership cards every year. So I just made a comment to Wade Morrow, who was just hard in the office when I first started there, that I'd really like to figure out a way that we can print our own cards. Just so happened he had worked for Kansas University, and he was printing the student cards for them on a printer. So he did some research, found where I could buy a printer for like $750, small one, that would print all our cards. Well, for $750 versus $2,000.
Gosh, yeah.
We saved a lot of money there. And then turned around and realized, you know, we can actually make our convention badges on the same machine. So we were paying $6 a badge for convention badges, and we were able to do them for like 50 cents a piece. So just little things like that helped us save us some money.
That's huge, yeah.
And we had a workhorse copier machine on a lease, cost us $13,000 a year. We got rid of it as soon as I could get off the lease. I got rid of that. We bought one for $3,000 that did the same thing we needed.
Yeah,
it was used. So we saved a lot of money there in that first few years. So I was pretty proud of that.
That's a big part of it, man. You know, there's a couple reasons I'm still in it. One, I love square dance calling. Another is Callerlab and all the connections I've met and all the people I've met. So that's a big part of it.
Yeah,
and without stuff you did, it wouldn't still be around. I mean, with the savings and all that.
Well, the pandemic really did a number on us. I mean, that's true for the whole activity. But I mean, my my goal was I was trying to keep our membership as high as we could, because for quite a while it was going down 30, 40 members a year. And that's 2-3% reduction every year.
Sure.
But during our first 10 years or so, we kept right at 1,500 members. We didn't really waver much off that. We stayed right at 1,500 members. So I was proud of that. So, but then the pandemic hit and that number went way down.
Yeah. And some places it's coming back pretty good. Some places a little slower than others. Some places not, unfortunately.
We're actually, I've been shocked by 4 classes we have this year. Well, I did one club last year. I think we had 5 students. But they all stayed with it and kept dancing. So they wanted me to come back this year and do the lessons. And I'm saying, well, okay, the first night we'll probably have about 5 to 8 people. And I got all set up, and I looked back at the doorway, and there's a line of people coming in, and it just kept coming. And all of a sudden, we had 30-some people walking the door, brand new dancers. And I have no idea how, why, for what reason. And then my Kansas City group, they had 20-some last year, which is good, but they had over 30 people come in the first night.
Gosh.
And then the club I just got this year, in September, I just started calling for them. They had 8 students last year, and they have 28 now in their class. So I've been shocked this year. Our lessons have been way up.
I would say today you're doing pretty well out there, man. More power to you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks. Well, Dana, I'd like to do this again sometime. I will see you at Callerlab in about 4 months, whenever that rolls around. And I'd like to sit down and talk with you there, brother. It's good talking to you, Dana.
Good talking to you. My wife will be with me this time. She's planning. She couldn't be there in Reno because
that's right.
She's just hard on a new job.
Okay.
And I was having a hard time adjusting because normally I'm busy with the convention.
Mm-hmm.
And I told myself, I'm not going to, if Teresa needs some help, she'll ask me. I've been kind of sitting with my hands on my butt there, trying not to jump in or offer any advice and let her handle it. And so, the hardest problem I had,
what's that?
I get up in the morning, I get all cleaned up, and I go and start at the closet. And I don't know what shirt to put on because Donna always tells me what shirt I'm supposed to wear.
I understand that problem, sir. I do.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But that was my hardest trouble I had that day. All right. Well, thank you for asking me. And
Dana, it's a pleasure, buddy. This will be out. I'm going to get it all set up, and I'll put it out on YouTube and Spotify and a couple other things, and I'll let you know. Okay. Man, it's a pleasure, Dana. I will see you soon, buddy.
Yeah,
have a good night. All right. Bye-bye.